California and Maine Fishermen and Partners, listen up. We know how challenging it can be to find financial support for your fishing business. Commercial fishing is expensive, and banks often don't give us a second look. But there's a way to find loans to support you, which you'll learn more about from today's guests. Introducing Noah Strouse, the Senior Loan Officer and Strategic Initiatives Manager at California FarmLink, and Hugh Cowperthwaite, the Senior Program Director of Fisheries and Aquaculture at the Coastal Enterprises Incorporated, better known as CEI, located in Maine. California FarmLink and CEI aim to provide opportunities to fishermen and partners by offering loans to help you enhance your boat, buy permits, buy a fishing boat and gear, invest in your family's seafood business, and more. They are community development financial institutions that loan to fishing captains, deckhands, and partners who want to invest in their fishing business. They also have educational resources and courses to ensure that you're using your money in ways that will give you the best return on your investment. Interested to learn more? Let's dive in. I'm Megan Waldrop, host of the Partners of Commercial Fishermen podcast, an extension of an online community for partners to connect and feel less alone. Our podcast invites fishermen, family, friends, and supporters of the industry to learn, laugh, vent, and hear stories about this incredibly unique way of life. What do you say? Let's dive in. Hi, Hugh. Hi, Noah. Thank you both so much for being here to speak with our incredible community of partners of commercial fishermen, and industry supporters. And I just want to dive in because I know we have lots to get to today. So I want to start with Noah. Noah, could you please explain to us what is a CDFI and what are the missions and purposes of your organization, California FarmLink?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Thanks for having us. So a CDFI is a community development financial institution. It's a designation for a mission-driven lender that you get from the U.S. Treasury Department. And CDFIs are intended to provide capital access to communities that aren't able to get access to capital through traditional means. So if you don't qualify for a loan through your local commercial bank because you don't have experience or you don't have tax records showing that you've done this before, or you're a first-time business owner, or you have a low credit score, kind of all the different reasons that historically, some good reasons and some not so good reasons why folks are unable to access capital in our society. CDFIs are an option for providing people with opportunities to start their businesses or develop affordable housing. It's kind of a range of different purposes that CDFIs focus on. Sometimes it's geographical, sometimes it's an industry. And California FarmLink, I'll just say briefly, is a CDFI focused on capital access for agriculture and fisheries in California specifically. So we provide a variety of services that go with our lending, which I'll talk about more in a minute, but maybe I'll stop there for now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And Hugh, I would love to know, can you tell us more about CIE and how you guys are able to provide services for the fishing community?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. So CEI, Coastal Enterprises, Inc., is a CDFI located in the state of Maine. And our mission is to build a just, vibrant, and climate resilient future for people and communities in Maine. We do this by integrating finance, business expertise, and policy solutions in ways that work with the economy in an equitable fashion.
I love that we have the East Coast and West Coast represented here, and two very, very strong fishing communities at that. So thank y'all both for explaining this. And Hugh, I would love to know, I would love to get a little background on your experience in fisheries. I know you have personal experience, and love to hear about the networks that you might be involved in that tie in with your role at CEI and how that has helped you better understand to serve your community.
Yeah, I was born and raised here in Maine. I moved away for a couple years, but I've always been attracted to the ocean and what's happening there. And for the last 35 years or so, I've been able to live here and have a career here focused on helping the commercial fishing and aquaculture industry thrive in the state of Maine. So that's an honor and a privilege, and I really do care about the state of Maine and the people here. We're a natural resource based economy, so there's quite a few jobs and people that make their living on the water. So that's been a great privilege for me. And some of the groups I work with, uh, more or less sort of external to the staff at CEI. I do. I'm involved with 3 or 4 different boards. I'm on the Maine Sea Grant Program Advisory Committee. So every coastal state in the US has a sea grant program. I believe there's 34. And these staff are an incredible resource for all things related to our nation's coasts and fisheries. So I do work with Sea Grant staff quite a bit. We have an entity here in Maine called the Maine Technology Institute, and I sit on the Aquaculture and Marine Technology Board of that entity. And it's pretty much grant funding that's targeting innovation and technology in the state of Maine. They're actually a line item in the state of Maine budget. So that's been a great way to be connected with our financing capacity as well as grant funds. I sit on the Maine Fishermen's Forum Board, which is an annual trade show here in the state, to meet once a year for 3 days to talk all things fisheries and aquaculture. And lastly, I'm on NOAA's MAFAC committee, which is the Marine Fisheries Advisory Committee to NOAA, where that's a sort of a high level look at fisheries nationwide, what's going on in the different states. And that's been a tremendous learning opportunity for me to, understand exactly what is happening in other states and how that relates to our nation's fisheries.
That's great. Thank you for that. And Noah, I want to shout out that we met at the Pacific Marine Expo in Seattle a few years ago. And
That's
California FarmLink has primarily in the past, or when they started, focused on farmers and ranchers. And then here y'all are at the Pacific Marine Expo. And it was really nice to see that there was now an outreach for fishermen. What inspired you to open up into our community?
Yeah, so it's been kind of a long journey. FarmLink started, as you mentioned, focused on farmers and ranchers, to solve, as our name implies, to solve the farm succession crisis. So older farmers retiring, younger farmers being unable to access land and access the resources to start their own business. So we were intended to help link older and younger farmers to keep the small agriculture industry going. And that might sound really familiar to folks in the fisheries space because it's a really similar challenge. We began in 1999, and only about 4 or 5 years ago in 2019 is when we officially expanded our work into the fisheries space. So we have kind of grown over the years into being a CDFI lender, providing capital towards farmers and ranchers, and now fisheries as well. We also do kind of a variety of services that complement our lending. So we do educational programming focused on small business owners to help them with the basic issues of running a small business, like incorporation and taxes and insurance and cash flow management. And we've expanded that work as well into the fisheries space. So there's, so many parallels between agriculture and fisheries, like challenges accessing capital, expensive barriers to entry, whether you need a permit or a vessel. There's kind of a broad, push towards scale in both of those industries that makes it hard to succeed as a small scale business. It makes it so you really need to seek out the highest value markets you can find for your product. There's just so many similarities. So we've recognized this for a long time. And like I mentioned, in 2019, we officially expanded our work into fisheries, and we did so by taking over the administration of this really cool program in California that was started in 2008 called the California Fisheries Fund. And it was managed for a long time by the California State Ocean Protection Council and the Environmental Defense Fund. And the program was originally designed to provide loan funds, a revolving loan fund for small fishermen across the state. And as we've taken it over, and I can talk more about this in a little bit, we've kind of tried to shift the focus of the program to really the smallest scale businesses, which is where there's also the most challenges getting capital. If you're a large fisheries operation, you can go to a commercial lender. But if you're a deckhand and you're trying to get your first boat or your first permit, it's a lot harder. So yeah, we can talk details more in a minute, but that's kind of our story of how we've ended up in the fisheries space, and how it kind of makes sense for us as an organization.
That's great. I know a lot of listeners their ears are peaking up just to think that there's an actual opportunity out there for funding other than going to a bank. And I know a lot of people have not great experiences with banks. And one of the best parts about working with a CDFI like CEI and California FarmLink is that they continue to support you. It's not just here's some money, figure it out. Hope you
Right.
Wish you the best of luck. And I want to know, like, how does a CDFI even get started? Like I saw on the CEI website really cool pictures from back in the 70s of people who seemed to really care about their community, and it started making a difference immediately. And I would love, Hugh, if you could walk us through how CEI got started.
Yeah, CI was started in 1977 by Ron Phillips, who was a civil rights activist and a recent seminary graduate. He started CI to create income and employment and ownership opportunities for people that, were basically left out of the economic mainstream. So that was his purpose and intent. It came out of the civil rights movement. And our first real investment or project at CEI was the Boothbay Region Fish and Cold Storage Facility, which basically burned, and the community rallied and came together around this important asset for the community, for the fishing community, and rebuilt the facility. So CEI put loan capital into this and helped, sort of bring this resource back to life. And that was our flagship project. So from there, we've grown into many other different areas. Natural resource-based economy is really how Maine planted ourselves at CEI, but we do have an agriculture program. We work in childcare, housing, job creation, job quality. We have a venture capital subsidiary. So really lots of irons in the fire under the CDFI roof.
So Hugh, I'm wondering, what has CEI learned about the fishing industry and other communities that you serve over the years? Have there been certain themes or challenges that you guys have really raised to the surface?
Well, for fishing specific, I would say, since that's the lens I work under, I would say just persistence. The fishing community is very hardworking and dedicated. There's constant changes coming at them. So they need to adapt and learn, and traditionally many fishermen would change to different fisheries throughout the year. So that's been takes a lot of planning, adapting to weather, changing fisheries. That's been a huge piece of that sector.
Yeah, absolutely. And Noah, you kind of mentioned this earlier about the similarities between the farmers and ranchers and fishermen. So I wanted to ask you, what are the unique roles that your specific CDFI has in serving the fishing businesses?
Yeah, just to build on what he was saying, I think diversification and resilience are kind of the key elements that we try to build into all of our lending and our programs. I mean, it used to be in California that you could do just Dungeness crab and make good money on that one fishery, and then that was your year. And over time, now that's not possible because of climate change and regulation and shortened seasoned and skipped seasons even. So now we have a lot of folks that are doing Dungeness crab and salmon and open access and black cod and just kind of, building out all the options to be able to weather the challenges that come each year. So we really emphasize in working with folks that we want to try to be prepared for those challenges and help set them up with multiple permits and gear types and a vessel that can accommodate different gear types, so that they can be ready for all that. Yeah, that's kind of a significant thread that I think is just affecting all fisheries, all components of the industry right now, is being ready for increased volatility and closures. And yeah, it's a challenging time, but I think by kind of building that into the model and having partners and financing to be prepared for that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Financial management is definitely one of the biggest pain points, challenges, and wins in our community when we're able to get it right. And knowing that there's people out there to help support us in that way is really huge. And so, Hugh, I'd love to know, what have your experiences told you about what folks in the industry need to be successful?
I kind of addressed this in the last question. So maybe I could just tack on a little bit to what Noah was saying. I think, a CDFI can take more risk. Mission is a huge part of our effort. We're not always just focused on being paid back. Sure, we need to be paid back, but we do look at loan deals for other reasons. Is it supporting something new? Could it offer some diversification in the fishing industry? And we often lend credibility to a business by putting money in. So if CEI puts money in, then maybe some of the other banks and financial institutions are attracted to a specific project. We can also access federal loan programs, so providing longer-term capital and resources that can be used, in the form of loans and sometimes grants and other financial services.
That's great. Thank you.
I just want to jump on that because I think Hugh illustrated something really well. The dimension of CDFIs being able to take more risk than other lenders. And like conceptually, I think that makes sense, but to kind of like spell that out for folks who might not be as familiar with, the financing process and with lenders, it means I'll speak for FarmLink, it means specifically things like, whereas a normal bank would say, oh, you need to meet XYZ collateral ratio for your loan. And there are all sorts of challenges with collateral in commercial fishing, like vessels are collateral, but there's risks associated with that. And permits are these intangible assets that are kind of difficult to use as collateral for a lot of lenders. But we're able to tap that. And that's a risk to the lender, but that's something we're able to take on. Lots of lenders want to see 5 years of production records or your, fish tickets to show, okay, you've landed XYZ per year. But if you're a deckhand who's starting your business for the first time, you don't have your own records to show. You may know the industry in and out, and you know exactly how you're going to run your boat and run your business. But without formal documentation of that, that can be a deal breaker for commercial lenders. So that's another instance where folks like us can take on the risk, and the risk is mitigated in the language of lenders by building relationships with the borrower and the business owner, and understanding the industry and understanding the community. So yeah, that difference of us being able to take on more risk is what separates us from other types of lenders. But it's also kind of core to who we are and how we operate in the community.
Thank you for mentioning that and highlighting again about the ability for deckhands to achieve these loans, because that is so true. I mean, you could feel stuck. How are we going to move forward when it, like we said, the barrier for entry is insanely high for commercial fishing. And it's great that CDFIs can use boats or permits as collateral, because for a lot of fishing families, that's our 401k. That's our investment. We put a lot of our money into the business. I mean, that is everything. So to know that that is actually of value and of asset to a lender is huge. Noah, what loan products do you have available for fishermen? And more importantly, how soon can they get the loans?
Yeah, great question. So we serve kind of the broad spectrum of the California fisheries industry. So boat loans, permit loans, combined boat and permit package loans, which is common, gear, working capital. Let's say you just need money to fuel up at the beginning of the season to go out and fish. Kind of a wide variety. I mean, even loans for kind of value added processes, like let's say you need you're renting a commercial kitchen facility so you can process your own fish so you can sell it at a higher value. We can help finance something like that. Or you need a new truck to tow your boat. We can help finance something like that. So we're pretty open to serving kind of any business purpose for a commercial fishing borrower. How soon can they get the loans because it's a good question. And the short answer is it depends. It's usually like a 2 to 3 month process. A lot of that depends on how organized and ready the borrower is. So if you come to us with all your records, you have your taxes, you have a business balance sheet, even if it's a basic one put together, you know exactly how much money you need, you know exactly what you're going to use it for. That expedites the process a lot, because those are the kinds of questions and the materials we need to gather. And nobody becomes a fisherman because they want to also be an accountant or a bookkeeper, but that is the reality, that those materials are key to the loan process. And lots of standard lenders, if you go to them and you don't have those things, they'll say, okay, see you later, we can't help you. And CDFIs can work with folks to help put that stuff together. It does add a little bit of time to the process. So yeah, I would say usually in like the 2 to 3 month range from the time you walk in the door to the time the money is sent out and you get the loan.
Okay, great. I know there's so many partners of commercial fishermen that are doing a Rolodex right now saying, okay, where are all these documents? Because they are the accountants, they are the bookkeepers, they are the managers of the business mainly. And I appreciated what you said about how the loan can go to many different projects. It doesn't have to be just for a boat or just for the specific fishing season. It can be for the prep. It can be for the direct to consumer fishing business. So my question on that is, many partners are in charge of the direct to consumer fishing businesses. They sell their husbands or their fishermen's, their partners catch. Are partners able to apply for loans to help with that direct to consumer fishing business? Or is this something that the fishermen would apply for their family business?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Generally, we can do it in whatever way makes the most sense for the borrower, for the applicant. So for example, there's some folks we work with in Northern California that are kind of a combined family operation where the husband is the fisherman and the wife runs a value-added business selling her husband's catch, but also they buy some other fish from other fishermen that go through the value-added business. And we, working with them, have been able to do a loan directly there. Without getting into the weeds, it's about how are they incorporated and what's the tax status and all that. But we were able to do a loan that essentially went directly to the value-added side of the family business to help them with their processing. So, depends case by case, but we can usually kind of meet folks where they're at, whatever makes the most sense.
That's great. And Hugh, is this similar to how CEI operates in the sense of how long does it take to go through the process to retrieve a loan? And are those loans available for other projects outside of specifically the fishing boat? Do they go to direct to consumer fishing businesses, things like that?
Yeah, I definitely hear some similarities in sort of loan process and review. One of the things we do is specifically market our loan funds to the audience. So we have a commercial fisheries loan, we have a sea farm loan, and we have what we call a marine green loan, which is relatively new. So we're trying to position ourselves, to understand and speak the language of the industry and target those loan products to our clients. So, commercial fishing loan can be for a boat, gear, equipment, nets, working capital, real estate, shoreside infrastructure. Our sea farm loan is for, boats, gear, access to markets, similar uses. But commercial fishing is definitely different than sea farming. So there are some nuances to that. And our marine green loan is more for environmental upgrades. Could be an electric outboard engine. We're trying to expand and get into that sector and promote the use of solar, charging stations, ways to move away from fossil fuel. Unfortunately, the fishing industry is, very, very connected to fossil fuels and everything from gear to fuel use. So whatever we can do to move away from that is smart. So I would say our application process, once we have what we call a complete application, like Noah said, we need the cash flow projections, some form of a business plan, tax returns, credit score, collateral, those types of things that are very similar to what a bank would ask for. We say anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to, going from what's considered a complete application to a loan closing. And, you mentioned direct to consumer. I would just say that, when COVID happened, seafood markets, seafood restaurants, everything was kind of upended overnight. And, fishermen and aquaculturists were looking for markets because people had stopped going to restaurants. And that created a real opportunity both for commercial fishing and aquaculture to explore direct to consumer markets out of necessity, not even I want to do this, but I have to do this. And that's certainly stuck with a lot of our sea farmers, mostly the oyster farmers.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. And wondering also another important question, what is the maximum amount that you loan to fishermen, and what are the average loans that you've seen in the past few years?
Our loans are typically for commercial fishing anywhere to, 25,000 up to maybe 250,000. And, a $25,000 loan might be for a young fisherman who's been working as a deckhand, as a sternman. Maybe they're in the apprentice program in the state of Maine to get their own license, because you can't just go and get a commercial fishing license. There's a whole process for that. And so they actually have to, document their hours working on a vessel. And that could be a small loan where we help someone transition from a sternman to launching their own business. And that's pretty satisfying when that happens. The larger loan requests are typically for vessel purchases or, gear replacement.
That's so great. So amazing to hear that opportunity. How about you, Noah? What are the average loans and the maximum amount of loans that California FarmLink gives to fishermen and fishing families?
Yeah, so we're in a pretty similar range. Our minimum is usually about 25,000. Our maximum is probably around 350, 400,000 right now. And it all just depends on kind of the business and the fishery and just making sure that the loan makes sense for the folks. We currently, our loan terms are going up to 10 years for our fisheries loans. And in terms of like the characteristics of our fisheries loans, the average is probably around $100,000. We, like I mentioned earlier, are really trying to focus our lending on the smaller scale end of the spectrum of folks kind of just getting started or getting their first permit. And we certainly do work with larger, more established businesses as well, but more of our loans are on the smaller side.
Great. Love it. Love it. Okay. Now I'm going to stick with you and would love for you to walk us through the fisherman borrower experience. What does that look like in California FarmLink? And then at the end, what locations and harbors have you served?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with the second part of that question, which is that we work in pretty much every harbor in California. I mean, from Crescent City in the north down to San Diego, Tuna Harbor. There's lots of small scale fishermen down there we work with. So it's the best part of my job is getting to travel all over the state and visiting folks and meeting them at their boats. The process for borrowers is, sometimes people hear about us online. Sometimes there's a word of mouth referral from, someone in the boat next to them in the harbor saying, oh, I need to do this on my boat. I don't have the capital for this. So people usually give us a call and want to know what we do and how it works. And everybody's always a little bit surprised just to learn about the existence of our program, that there is kind of a lending program targeted for small scale fishermen like this, because there just aren't many in California. I mean, lots of folks, you need a commercial fishing loan, you work with a lender from another state even, where there's more familiarity with the commercial fishing industry. So we kind of do like an initial get to know you. We start to collect all the documentation that we talked about earlier, like taxes and bank statements and records. And the most labor intensive part is usually projections. Some fishermen have kind of projections for the year. I mean, they all know their businesses top to bottom, and they can tell you exactly what they're going to do, but they don't have an Excel sheet with all this stuff modeled out, right? So a lot of the time is just being on the phone together, being in person together, saying, okay, how many pounds of this are you going to catch? What's your per pound sales price? How many gallons of fuel are you going to burn per day? How many trips per month? All that kind of stuff, just because that's what we need to do as a lender, do our due diligence to make sure we have clear projections for the cash flow. And sometimes it can feel like a lot. Sometimes it can feel kind of invasive. Why do you need to know all this? Why do you need to know every detail about my life and my car loan and my mortgage payment? And the kind of overarching reason is that because we want to build the loan in a way that will actually work for your day-to-day life. We don't want to give you a loan that you can't afford to pay because we didn't take something into consideration. And if that means we need to make it a 10-year loan instead of a 5-year loan, that's all good with us. We're happy to do that. We just want to make sure we're setting you up for success.
Love it. What are the interest rates for loans?
Yeah, for our fisheries loans, it's a fixed flat 7% rate currently. And that doesn't really change. We don't anticipate that changing. We have in the past had kind of special funding opportunities. Like during COVID, we actually had some 0% loans we were able to do for commercial fishermen. And we do also have some disaster relief funds available for when there are things like a total season closure or like major storms, that damage someone's boat or gear. So we have a bit of flexibility there. But generally it's that 7%.
Great, thank you. And Hugh, what is the Fisherman Borrow experience at CEI? Is it similar to California FarmLink, or what locations and harbors do you serve? Can you give us any detail on that?
Yeah, we have the Maine coastline is quite diverse, so the geography alone creates opportunities and challenges. We have 144 coastal towns. Just around 50 of those are, significant sort of commercial fishing areas. And we have a lot of islands and peninsulas and rivers. So our coastline is, about 3,500 miles when you stretch it all out. So, that alone is a bit daunting sometimes, but we do work in all these different communities and coastal counties. I mentioned the sort of smaller $25,000 loan to a stern man. Another example might be, a father and son business. They're lobstermen, but we help them learn about farming scallops from another part of the world, and actually took them to Japan, and they came back to Maine and launched a scallop farming business, and have sort of moved away from lobstering entirely to now farming scallops and fishing wild scallops. So that's a pretty extreme example of some of the work we do, but and it doesn't happen overnight. But that's I like to showcase an example like that, because it just shows that fisheries change, and fishermen need to be adaptable and try new things. We've had, we do some training, which I'll probably talk about in a little bit, but some aquaculture training classes, and we had a gentleman come in, took the class, came back and took it again. So he went through twice and then launched a family business with his kids, started an oyster farm, built a specialized vessel, and eventually even opened an oyster bar. So just this sort of really, doubling down in the industry and finding multiple ways to engage. And we have, our aquaculture industry is growing. There's a lot of interest in it. So there's some diversification opportunities there.
Absolutely. I appreciate that you brought up that example. Sounds so incredible, and how supported they must have felt to be able to go travel to a different country and learn a trade, which also lends to the storytelling and the history of fishing. We share it with each other from all over the world, no matter our backgrounds. And I also appreciate that you brought up aquaculture and commercial fishing and wild caught fishing. That's can be such a touchy subject within the commercial fishing industry. A lot of people feel threatened by aquaculture, and depending on what fisheries they're in. And it's also nice to know that there is life beyond fishing the way that you know it. Like you say, we have to remain flexible and be able to adapt with the growing and the changing fisheries, no matter what that is, and that your life with the ocean does not have to end on the boat in your respective way that you've known it. There are so many different opportunities to continue that and to serve your family and the world with high quality seafood. And so thank you for bringing that up. And to dive in even more, and I'm going to talk to Noah about this too. What can people expect or prepare for when they go into these technical assistance programs and resources that you offer? So for example, it seemed like that was a tailor-made program for this fisherman. So let's say, I'm a fisherman and I'm trying to figure out, I need a loan for my lobster fishery. What would they expect? What can they expect when they come to CEI?
Yeah, so we, for more traditional lobstermen, we have myself as a, sort of a resource person, and I'm really the conduit between the fishing industry and the resources at CEI. So what does CEI have to offer? my role is to represent that and sort of connect the dots. So for a fisherman like that, it would often involve some business counseling sessions. We have business counselors on staff who help them, get their ideas from their head onto paper and prepare them for financing. Many people have, bootstrapped their businesses for years and years and never taken a loan. And that's great. As Noah said, we don't want to put people into debt. We're just there if they need it. So that might be the experience for a lobsterman, getting ready for financing with a counselor and then access to the loan capital that we have to offer. A little more targeted initiative to help commercial fishermen explore the aquaculture industry or possible transition. We have been running a class called the Aquaculture in Shared Waters training program. And essentially that's a 12 to 15 week training module where the class meets once a week and explores the fundamentals of aquaculture in Maine, the different species you can raise, whether it's oysters, mussels, scallops, or kelp. What's the biology around that? The gear farm, the farm setup, the vessel needs, biosecurity, permitting and leasing, sales and marketing, business counseling and finance. So we've run that class over the last 12 years and have had about 500 students go through that. And that's a mix of, standard sort of commercial fishermen, or it could be an existing aquaculturist who wants to learn more, or it could be a brand new entrepreneur looking to, get into the industry. And we like to say it's an opportunity to learn before you sort of dive in and double down. And it can be a reason to say, you know what, this isn't for me. I'm actually not wanting to do this the more I've learned about it. So I think it's a valuable exercise and offering for people to go through.
Absolutely. And I want to stick with you on talking about the significant shift that you've seen from lending to wild-caught commercial fishermen into aquaculture over the years. And would love for you to dive in on what your thoughts are that has caused that shift and what are the main aquaculture fisheries that you're seeing right now?
Sure. Yeah, when I started at CEI over 20 years ago, I know I'm dating myself there, but our lending was really in around commercial fishing. So the lobster industry, scallop fishing, some ground fish boats. And the ground fish has really suffered in Maine for several reasons, mostly proximity to fishing grounds, the steaming time from Maine to the fishing grounds. When days at sea were in place, the clock was ticking as soon as you left the dock. And so the further away you are, you're losing time when you're not fishing. And then we got into challenges around the cost of fuel, taxes on fuels, being more attractive in either Massachusetts or Rhode Island. So boats actually leaving the state, access to ice, the proximity to, a landing site for your fish, and insurance costs. And then you get declining stocks and changing regulations and aging vessels on top of all that. So just this really, difficult way to navigate a fishing business through that. Those are, tangible challenges people can get their head around. We no longer have a Gulf of Maine shrimp fishery, and that's primarily temperature related, water temperature. They're not where they used to be. We used to have a pretty robust sea urchin fishery that was essentially overfished. We've had challenges with invasive species like the green crab coming in and decimating our soft shell clam industry. So all of those factors and pressures have made fishermen and aquaculturists interested in learning about, well, what can I do if these challenges are in place? So I've spent a lot of my time over the last 15 years looking for opportunities and practices in other parts of the world. And specifically, some of the efforts I've led around technology transfers. We've done quite a bit of work in northern Japan, learning about scallop farming, also their kelp farming industry and kelp fishery for that matter. South Korea has a very robust kelp industry that's, decades old, hundreds of years old for that matter. And, in Maine, we've had a kelp farming industry now for about 15 years. So sort of late to the game, but learning from these traditions and cultures in other parts of the world that it's just part of their society. I think, like the Alaskan crab fisheries, the snow crab and the king crab, have collapsed from or been considered collapsed from warming waters and climate change. And in Maine, we have a crustacean, the lobster fishery. So what are the lessons we can learn from other parts of the world and how they've addressed those challenges? And I think, when you think about California or Maine or any other place with challenges, think about other parts of the world with a similar climate that may have species diversification that could lend lessons. So, Maine and Japan are same latitude, very similar climate, seasonality, natural resource economies, tourism. It makes sense for us in Maine to say, hey, our urchin fishery is essentially gone. Let's go to Japan and see what they're doing, not just with the wild fishery, but with farming urchins and feeding them kelp. It just makes sense. So I'm a huge advocate of that and, looking beyond Maine's borders for answers to some of the challenges we're facing.
Yes, I applaud that so much. It's so interesting how we feel like we're one giant family, and then at times we feel like we are each other's competitors. For example, when the spiny lobster fishery opens, our prices, from my understanding, we don't know how the prices are determined, but a lot of them are determined on what Mexico is getting for their spiny lobster. And then our price will change when Australia's seasons open. And so you're very connected to the world in that way that can feel like your family and then competitors, but to learn from one another, that just warms my heart to know that, yeah, look across the latitude and see what's going on. For example, we have spiny lobsters here in North Carolina because we are similar to Santa Barbara, California. However, we don't have a fishery for it. But it is interesting to see how we are a part of one big ocean, generally speaking. So thank you for that, Hugh. I appreciate your explanation. And Noah, I would love for you to talk about all the ways that California FarmLink helps in their technical assistance programs and resources that they offer to their fishermen and fishing families.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to say that's so cool to hear about everything Hugh just described. I mean, I think CEI has been around and doing this longer than FarmLink has, so we have a lot to learn from you guys. So thanks for sharing all that. Our technical assistance kind of has a range. We work with folks one-on-one as they come in for loans. We help them get, as Hugh said, loan ready. So kind of having all their documents in order. There's sometimes some kind of basic stuff of clarifying, exactly how funds are going to be used, and developing projections like we talked about. So some of it is kind of loan specific technical assistance. Other stuff is more broad business management technical assistance. So we have a couple different courses that we run year round. One is called the Resilerator, as in resilience, and that helps folks with incorporation status, taxes, employment law, insurance, kind of all the ABCs of small business management. So it's a really great course that we offer that for borrowers, but also just for the general, farming and fishing industry. Anyone can sign up for that. And we have a couple more advanced courses, like there's kind of a level 2 course that's focused on employment issues. So larger scale operations that have more employees. We have some succession planning resources on our website. We actually have a whole course for succession planning in agriculture. We don't have a course yet for succession planning in fisheries because, it's different in complicated ways in terms of who owns the permit and whose name is on the boat and who can use it and all that. So we're working though on developing kind of a programmatic approach to succession planning in fisheries. On our website, we have a resource library where there's a bunch of different stuff listed. And one of those documents is a succession planning for small fisheries kind of white paper. It's very early thinking on these issues, but we're working on it. And there's some folks we've worked with who have come to us for loans that are essentially succession loans to purchase, the business assets of a retiring fisherman. So there's a lot of cool opportunities there for figuring out how to do those transitions in a way that provides the most benefit for, both the retiring fisherman and the person who's purchasing their business.
That's so incredible. I can't wait to see even more the resources that everyone provides, CEI and California FarmLink. The succession planning really sticks out to me because we, not only do we have new fishermen in our community and those who have been seasoned and raising kids by themselves and starting direct-to-consumer fishing businesses, but also partners of commercial fishermen who are wondering how they're going to transition out of fishing. A lot of people equate our industry, and I do too, so closely related to the military. That is the only profession or industry that is similar to commercial fishing that I understand. I'm a military brat, so I've seen it, more on a personal level. And in the military, there's an actual courses and there's ways to process out of the military because it is such a shock, it can be a shock to not only the soldiers, but the families. And that's how it is with fishing. It's not just a job, it's a lifestyle, it's an identity, it's an entirely different language. We don't operate on the same time as everyone else who have land-based operations. We're dictated by the weather and the moon. It's all, it's a very spiritual sense. I feel like there is a connection there. So the fact that there is actual succession planning feels very supportive and helpful. So thank you all for having all the resources that you have available, including thinking of us at the end of our careers as we maybe launch into a new one, like going into aquaculture. Who knows, what that transition could be like, going into other businesses. Maybe we want to be farmers and ranchers. That's another thing. There's a lot of people who want to homestead. A couple people in my community, in our private chat, they were talking about that. They're like, we want to find some land and that's what we want to do. And maybe they go into another industry that y'all provide. So that's great. It's a one-stop shop with CEI and FarmLink for sure.
And just to shout out, there's a lot of other great resources around succession planning that are available broadly and also for fisheries. Alaska Sea Grant has on their website a bunch of great resources around succession planning. So I don't know if anyone has it totally solved yet, but there are lots of resources out there.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. Sea Grant, Alaska Sea Grant. We love the people up there. Thanks for giving them a shout. So, okay, this is an interesting and important question too. Who are the people and the institutions behind the sources of capital we'll start with California FarmLink.
Yeah, it's kind of an array of capital providers that, they invest in FarmLink and then FarmLink uses their investment for our loan funds. So as a CDFI, we work with a variety of kind of family foundations, individuals, nonprofit organizations and philanthropic organizations, that provide us very low interest capital that we use for our loan program. Some money that comes into the organization is used for our operating budget and to fund programs like our educational programs. But yeah, mostly it's private sources of low interest funds that we use for our loan fund.
Okay. And Hugh, is that similar to what happens at CEI?
Yeah, I would say the sources of capital for lending, but also program support are through grants and donations. I think about 65%. Our lending and investing itself generates interest to support the organization. And then we do have some subsidiaries within CEI that are for-profit entities that can help support the CEI parent company. We do have, state and federal resources, some philanthropic funding, as well as some high net worth individuals. I will say a lot of our commercial fisheries lending has been supported by the EDA, the Economic Development Administration, which is part of Department of Commerce. So we're taking federal dollars and creating a revolving loan fund specific to Maine to invest in the commercial fishing industry. And we have two pools of loan capital from the EDA, one from 1994, and I think the other was 2008 or something. So, having access to that capital and reporting to the EDA, annually, what are we doing? How are we doing it? Eventually, those funds are let go for us to continue to administer as a loan fund without reporting requirements, which is nice. You kind of prove yourself and do that for 25 years. So EDA has been a huge supporter of our fisheries loan funding.
Awesome. Noted, you have a note?
I neglected to mention previously that for our fisheries lending specifically, most of our funding actually does come from two specific sources. The California Fisheries Fund is funded by the Environmental Defense Fund and the California Ocean Protection Council. So those are state bond funds. Complicated picture, but those two sources are significant on the fisheries side for us. So I wanted to make sure I acknowledge them.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you for doing that. So Noah, we'll stick with you. And you mentioned that California FarmLink offers like a disaster accommodations that are a part of your programming. For example, like the salmon fishery closures in California. Can you explain how that works and how are the emergency funds dispersed? Is it different than a normal loan process? Is it the same?
Yeah, it's pretty similar to our normal loan process in that we want, when disasters happen, we want to be able to support people ASAP and provide the funds that they need to switch fisheries or keep operating or, whatever the need is. And at the same time, we are not able to do grants. So it is a loan, it might be a 0% disaster loan, but it is a loan. So for the same reason I described earlier of we don't want to, set anyone up for failure, we do need to be able to make sure that, okay, we're going to switch to plan B, but plan B is going to lead to you being able to repay this loan. So there's still a bit of underwriting that goes on for our disaster loan program, but it is an expedited process.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, what is a disaster? I mean, it doesn't need to be a federally recognized disaster like the salmon closure. Sometimes that can take a long time, and maybe there are disaster funds that are going to come through eventually, but that can take years, as people know. So we want to be able to be there right away. So the range can be fishery closures, fishery opener delays if it's a critical need, storms, accidents, damages to boats and equipment. Maybe your engine breaks down right before the opener. That's an emergency. So yeah, we're pretty open to kind of understanding the context that disasters happen.
Great. Yeah, I started twitching when you said engine breaking down because we had that happen this season and that was not fun. A lot of partners can attest to that happening. It just makes us stronger at the end. Okay, this is another question. As they're paying back the loan, is it kind of like any kind of bill that you have, like a credit card bill? You pay monthly or you pay every year? Like what is the structure of payment?
Yeah, it can depend based on the needs and the cash flow of the business. So most of our loans are monthly payments, but we have flexibility to set up repayments on a schedule that makes sense for the business. So, sometimes we can do kind of focusing payments only during the season when you have revenue coming in, when you have income coming in. Sometimes we can do, instead of monthly, we can do bi-monthly or every 6 months. It's pretty unusual to do anything more than that, just because it puts more pressure on the borrower. If you have one big payment per year, that's a lot of pressure. And so that usually doesn't make sense for folks. But we have other terms that we can do to kind of help make things work. Like if for example, we're just about to close a loan to a small fisherman who's going to be starting in a new fishery, and we are doing a period at the beginning of the loan where it's interest-only payments for a period of time to reduce, his payments as he's just kind of getting started, because there's going to be a learning curve. So things like that we can build into loan structures as well.
Great. How about for CEI? Is that similar to CEI? Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely will do seasonal payments if someone requires or wants that. We don't typically do much in the sort of disaster relief area, but we certainly pay attention to what's going on in the landscape, and we'll reach out to our portfolio and say, hey, are you okay? Do you want to talk? That certainly happened with COVID. I think across our whole organization, we reached out to everyone, not just fisheries, but just made sure they knew we were there and we were paying attention. And, if they're not accessing our emergency money, how can we help them access other, FEMA funds or something that may be, have a program that's ready to help. We have had a couple of very significant coastal storms last January, a year ago, right within 5 or 6 days of each other, that just did a tremendous amount of damage to a lot of the wharves and piers on the coastline. And unfortunately, a lot of those are privately owned. Insurance doesn't necessarily, step in and cover that. So that's been a big issue of the last year, is just trying to help get businesses, back in capacity, mostly so they can just, get the bait onto vessels and have vessels land lobster. And so things like that are just seem to be happening more and more now than they have in the past. So it's like, hang on and be ready to help this industry survive.
That's beautiful. And that just shows, it just warmed my heart what you just said, was checking in on the people who are getting the loans, saying, are you okay? Do you want to talk? I mean, that just makes me want to tear up, because another reason why y'all are so different than banks is that it's people who care. This is neighbors generally wanting the best for their neighbors. And that's how the fishing industry deserves that kind of love and respect, because I know a lot of times they feel like they're being pushed aside or they're being blamed for whatever it is. And to know that lenders like CEI and CA FarmLink actually care is it means the world. So thanks for caring, y'all. Appreciate what you put out there, seriously. And Hugh, I'd love to ask you, it's one of our final questions, if there's anything you'd like to add, or what do you hope people take away from this conversation with you and CEI?
Well, I think just, understanding the fishing community and aquaculture people, they're out there, they're producing food, to put on our tables, and just having respect for that. They're out there, in risking their lives to have this lifestyle, and they wouldn't do it if they didn't love it. It's hard work, and it should be respected. And it's not just Maine, it's all over the world. It's food production. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we're doing here in the state of Maine.
Thank you, Hugh, for your time so much. And Noah, I'd love to know what you hope is the biggest takeaway.
Thanks. I think it's just that we are here for folks. Whatever you're trying to do with your fishing business, we're here to support you, whether it's a loan, a class. We want to see the industry grow. We want to see the kind of, as we straddle the agriculture and fisheries space, there are so many more organizations and support services in this kind of ecosystem on the ag side of things. And there are amazing organizations and people doing work on the fisheries side, but it's not quite the same level of support. So we're really interested in seeing that grow. So that's kind of through our direct business, but also partnerships with other folks and other organizations. And as we're, kind of new to this space still, we're still, trying to build our community as much as we can. So it's an important part of our mission and our vision of kind of the food system that we want to see in California, and the opportunities for wealth building that we want small food producers and seafood harvesters to have. So yeah, we would love to connect with folks.
Awesome. And on that note, how can people connect with you, Noah?
Yeah, you can check out our website. You can reach out in any of the ways on our website. You can contact me directly at my email at noah@cafarmlink.org. Maybe Megan, you can share contact info attached to the post of this. I'll give you my phone number and email right there.
Great. Awesome. And I'll put all of this in the show notes for everybody listening. And Hugh, what's the best way for people to contact you as well?
Probably just going to CEI's website. It's CEIMAINE.org.
Great. Yep. CEIMaine.org. And then it's CaliforniaFarmLink.org. It's California spelled out all the way. And like I said, show notes will be loaded with all of the ways that you can connect with both of these incredible organizations. Thank you so much, Hugh and Noah, for your time today and for your continued support with the fishing communities. We truly appreciate everything that you and your organizations are putting out in the world. So thank you for being such advocates for us.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks for your time and helping spread the message.
Absolutely.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. To support our community, I'd so appreciate it if you tap the subscribe button to this podcast or write a review. And if you're a POCF who wants to connect further, go to POCFpride.com for weekly vlogs and to learn about opportunities to join our private communities. We'd love to have you.